developing the objective work plan and budget for your ANA application. This webinar is hosted by the Eastern Region Training and Technical Assistance Center, a resource of the Administration for Native Americans. I am going to turn, my name is Rondell Clay. I'm the director of the Eastern Region, and I am going to turn our presentation over to Candy Carmi, our training or our technical assistance specialist for the center. Candy?
Thanks, Rondell, and again, welcome everyone. Thanks for taking time out of your busy day to join us. As Rondell indicated, I'm the technical assistance specialist for the Eastern Region, and I'm starting my 8th year of being a technical assistance provider, and boy oh boy has that time just flown right by. During the course of this time, I've been a panel reviewer. I've also conducted impact evaluations. I've worked on training curriculum development and conducted trainings. I've also, of course, worked with applicants on application development. I'm a member of the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin. ANA currently has 5 funding opportunity announcements out with a closing date of April 15th. There is technical assistance available to help you complete your ANA application. We do hold pre-application trainings. However, most of those have already been completed. But double check with your regional technical assistance provider to see if they're adding any trainings or if they have any other opportunities in their region. I have a slide at the end of this webinar that has their contact information. In addition to another type of technical assistance that we provide, of course, are webinars. ANA holds webinars every Thursday from 3 to 4 p.m. Right now, the focus is on application development. If you are currently receiving information for upcoming webinars, great. If you're not, sign up with your regional technical assistance provider and they'll send you out notifications. Next week's webinar is on submitting your application, and it's being conducted by the Alaska region. You can register for that webinar by going to ANA's website and hitting the Events tab. And if by any chance you wanted to see all of the previously recorded webinars, you can check them out by going to the link on the bottom of your page. That's a great resource, and there's a lot of great webinars that we've hosted previously. In addition to webinars, we also provide pre-application technical assistance. And pre-application technical assistance is one-on-one help with you to get your application ready to submit. We assign you someone to work with that'll help guide you on your application and getting it fine-tuned so that you can upload it into Grants.gov. If you would like to take part of this or receive technical assistance, contact your regional technical assistance provider. Again, their contact information is at the end. And forward them a letter or email that includes the following. You want to provide a 1 or 2 sentence synopsis on what you intend to do with your project and what program area you're applying under. You also want to include information on any project planning and development or pre-application trainings that you've attended. And lastly, provide the telephone number and email address for the individual that you'd like us to work with. To get the maximum benefit out of this process, we ask that we start the process with you when you've completed at least 75% of your application. So if you'd like to take advantage of this, definitely shoot us a request. We'd love to help you. Today we're going to be covering just a brief overview of ANA project components. We're also going to be talking about what is an objective work plan and how to complete it. We're also going to go over the budget and budget justification as well as how to complete both of those items. And lastly, we're going to go over how to ensure that the objective work plan and budget align. But before we dip into all of this, I'd like to ask you a question. There's going to be a poll that pops up on your screen. Have you written an A&A application before? Rondell?
Okie doke. We have the results of the poll. About 86% of you voted. 40% said yes, and 60% said no.
Wow, we have a lot of folks on here who are rather new to the process. Well, we hope that this is helpful. Again, reach out for technical assistance to help you further develop your application, and definitely check out those resource tools that I mentioned earlier. So let's get started. First thing is an overview of A&A project components. By the time you get to writing your objective work plan, you should have already completed some of the components for the A&A application. The first thing that you should have available is a problem statement that has been developed through community input. Whether it's community meetings, focus groups, surveys, through some type of community process, you've come up with a problem that the community has identified that needs to be addressed in your community. One problem. And that's what you're going to focus your project on. You also need to have come up with up to 3 SMART objectives. And again, you can only have a maximum of 3 objectives. And you'll see this acronym SMART peppered throughout the funding opportunity announcement. SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And you can find a lot more information in the funding opportunity announcement about developing objectives. You also need to have crafted a project goal. The project goal is what you intend to occur because you accomplished your objectives. It should demonstrate a reduction or elimination of that problem statement that you've developed. You also need to include a project approach. This is the companion to your objective work plan, and it narratively describes the activities that are going to take place, staff, consultants, partners, who's going to be doing those activities. It's going to describe leveraged resources, partners, contingency plans, community involvement during the project, your organizational capacity, sustainability. There is a lot of information that goes into that project approach. So refer to the funding opportunity announcement to make sure you've captured all that required information. A tip is that many grant writers actually use their objective work plan and write it first and use it similarly to how you would use an outline to write the approach. And the last 2 components are your objective work plan, which we're going to be just talking about today, and your budget and budget justification. So what is an objective work plan? Let's say your supervisor comes into your office and hands you a 150-page document and says, here's a project, you're going to implement it. Now, it might look as daunting as this stack of papers on your screen, but once you got over it and resigned yourself to tackling the project, I know if it was me, the first thing I would be thinking is, why, oh, why did I come into the office today? But once I got over that, I would start reading the document first. I'd probably jot down a bunch of notes in the margins, questions. I might pull out a calendar and look at, what type of time frame am I looking at to complete activities? I'd look around my office and see who I could delegate some of this to. Do we need to hire folks? Do we need to hire maybe some consultants to help with this? But definitely you would be scratching your head. What if we had a tool that provided you a step-by-step action plan for implementing your project, and it tells you when you're going to do your activities, who's going to be doing them, and what the results and benefits of completing those activities were. And it's all in one handy form. That's an objective work plan. It's a summary of the project design. It describes how, when, and by whom the project will be implemented. And it's commonly referred to as the blueprint for project implementation. Before I started work as a technical assistance provider, I used to work for a real estate developer, and I had to go around to various job sites. And at every construction site I visited, there would be blueprints. They'd be in the construction trailers and supervisors' cars. They'd be in buildings under construction. They used blueprints as a daily reference. And the objective work plan, when properly completed, should be a reference tool for your project, and it should show how you're going to build your project. So now how do you complete it? If possible, and again if possible, try to put together a project team. You'll find it's helpful if you can bounce ideas off of maybe another person in your office that's familiar with your organization. Whether it's a team or if it's just you're the only one writing this application, start brainstorming the key activities that are required to complete the objectives and the project. Now there's a number of ways to do this. You could just sit and jot down activities on a piece of paper. I've seen a lot of people that have taken Post-it notes and started writing Post-it notes, activities on Post-it notes, and putting them on a blank wall. And that lets them rearrange easily and put the activities into chronological order. But also while you're brainstorming about these key activities, also be thinking about any resources that you may require, consultants or special equipment. Think about all that as you're brainstorming these activities, because they go hand in hand. Once you've identified your activities, you need to start looking at who's going to complete them. Do you have staff available who can complete tasks? Do you need to hire some more staff? Do you need to hire some consultants? And lastly, look at your activities and come up with a realistic time to complete each activity. I italicized realistic for a reason. There were a lot of applications that I read last year that had objective work plans with activities that spanned the entire project year. While there are some activities that could span a year, maybe teaching a language, but most activities have a shorter time frame in which to be completed. So you really need to think about what is a realistic time to complete that activity. So now you've got all this information. Here's the objective work plan form. And this is a Word document. It is available on ANA's website. If you go into to ANA's website, you can just type in OWP in the search box, and it'll bring up this document that you can download. And I'd highly recommend that you use this. It's a great way to mock up your objective work plan, and you can add it and edit it as you see fit. Because remember, you need to submit this into a Grants.gov objective work plan. But let's go over this paper form. The first thing on here is a project title. I'm going to enter that. And remember, I said you needed to have your project goal. Well, you're going to need to enter it right here on this form. Then you're going to enter your project year. Under the objective number, you're going to put Objective 1, Objective 2, or Objective 3. Remember, you can only have a maximum of up to 3 objectives. You can have an objective that covers 1 year of your project, or you might have an objective that covers 3 years. If it covers 3 years, you will have a form that states Objective 1, Year 1, Objective 1, Year 2, and one form that says Objective 1, Year 3. If your objective spans 3 years, make sure that you don't just copy all 3 years and all the activities are identical. They shouldn't be carbon copies. Each year should have some different activities in it. So right in this area of the form, you're going to put that problem statement that I mentioned earlier. That problem statement should be identified in your needs for assistance. So you're going to pull the same problem statement that you've indicated there and enter it on this line of the form. And one thing to note is that this form has some very small cells in it. It expands. You're not restricted by the size of the cell. You can enter more information in here if you need to. In this part of the form, results expected, you're going to list there what will be produced by accomplishing this objective. And results could be something like workshops, training sessions, curricula created, teaching materials, strategic plans, codes developed. When you list those, you're also going to enter over on this part of the form, how are you going to determine that you've met those results? How are you going to track that? Under benefits expected, you're going to list the positive changes that derived from achieving those results. This should typically contribute to an improvement in people's lives. And it might be anything from number of people who become employed because you had job training classes. It might be the number of people who increase their language proficiency by 1 level. And again, you're going to be identifying how are you going to be evaluating that you met those benefits. The lower part of the form is where you're going to start entering your activities. Typically, on a lot of first-year projects, one of the first activities you're going to see is hiring. Hiring of a project position. So if that's your first activity, you would enter it under number 1, and then you would indicate in these 2 columns who is responsible for that activity. Who are the salaried project staff that are responsible for the hiring. And if you might want to put, in this instance, it might be a supervisor, and over here under other support, you might have your HR department or someone from your HR department that's helping with that hiring process. Under the time period column, you're going to indicate the time necessary for that hire. So you're going to start listing all the activities to complete that objective in this form. Now, remember I said all the activities. You are not restricted to 4 activities. You can add many more lines to this form. I shouldn't see an objective work plan with only 4 activities. If you hand me that, I'm going to be scratching my head wondering how do I implement this project. And as you're entering activities, remember your objective work plan should tie to your budget and your cost. So if you're listing that's in your budget that you have a project coordinator that's full-time, I should be seeing a lot of activities in the objective work plan that have the project coordinator involved, because you're requesting that they be a full-time staff person. So the OWP should support that. And also a good thing to remember is that if you're using a consultant, if you're asking for a consultant that you're intending to pay $50,000 per year to, I should see some activities in the objective work plan that cover that $50,000 in time that they're going to be working on the project. So just a good thing to remember is that your objective work plan should always tie to that budget. So remember that you're going to fill out that Word version first and make sure that everything's in chronological order, because this is the Grants.gov version of the objective work plan, and it looks pretty similar to that paper version. The yellow boxes are mandatory fields. You have to enter information in there. I think what's noteworthy with the Grants.gov version, there's a couple of things. It's very easy to add activities. On the Word form, you have to, go and use Word options to add lines. In order to add additional activities, all you have to do is click that Add Activity on the lower left-hand corner of the form. Easy. So you can add as many activities as you need. If you want to delete an activity, all you have to do is hit that X to the left of number 1. It's right here. Remember, I kept on saying chronological order when you're developing that objective work plan, because while you can easily add activities, this form does not let you insert activities. If you accidentally forget to include an activity, you can't just go in and insert it. You're going to have to add it, but after the last activity that you entered. And another tip is that while you're working on your Grants.gov version, while you're entering in the information, remember to save your Grants.gov application package. There is a save button on the very first page of that package. Remember to hit that continuously almost. There's nothing worse than entering a whole bunch of information in this objective work plan and you've just entered 45 different activities for 3 objectives. You walk away from your desk and talk with someone, come back, and all that information is gone. That is really frustrating. So remember to save frequently. And also, another tip, don't jam multiple activities in one cell. Add a line for each activity. So you try to make it very clear. It's going to be easier for you to manage, and it's also going to be easier for the reviewer to look at. So here's some tips on the OWP, or just a OWP recap. You can have a maximum of 3 objectives for project period. That means that you can only have 3. An objective can span more than 1 year. And the OWP form also expands to accommodate a number of activities and text. Make sure that you try to enter activities in chronological order. Remember, your objective work plan should be an action plan for you to implement your project. One of the best tips is to download that Word version of the objective work plan and enter all your information in it first and try to get it in chronological order, and then use it to cut and paste into the Grants.gov form. And the last thing is that OWP, when you complete it, I should be able to take that document, and if I had the requisite skills, I should be able to implement your project using that objective work plan. It should be a blueprint, just like on those construction sites. So we have another participant poll for you. Now that we're going to start talking about the budget, I was wondering how many of you have created a project budget. So there's going to be another poll popping up on your screen.
Boy, these guys like to vote. Got about 87% who have completed the poll. 80% say yes and 20% say no.
Well, that's good to hear. One of the things that we see a lot is that some applicants have an accounting department that are going to prepare their budget for them. And that's great, but still you need to be familiar with the project budget and how it ties to your project activities. So if you have to create a budget, hopefully this information along with the funding opportunity announcement should help you. Your budget provides a detailed description of your federal and non-federal resources needed to carry out the project. The OWP is a blueprint for your project implementation. Your budget and budget justification are a blueprint for your project cost. The budget justification is the written description which describes how you came up with all those costs listed in your budget and how they tie to the objective work plan. It details calculations, how you came up with these costs. And lastly, you need to provide a budget and a budget justification for each year of your project. If you have a 3-year project, there should be a budget, 3 budgets, one for each year, a budget for year 1, a budget for year 2, and a budget for year 3, as well as an accompanying budget justification for each of those budgets. So what do you need to complete your budget? Well, first, that handy-dandy objective work plan. You need to have that because that lists out your activities and the staff and everything that you need to implement the project. You also probably might need to go to your accounting department and check with them on salaries, especially if you're going to use any existing organizational staff on the project. You'll also need to get payroll tax rates, information on retirement plans, health insurance, workers' comp. If your tribe or organization has an indirect cost rate agreement, you would probably get a copy of that from them because you're definitely going to need to include that in your attachments. Make sure that it's the current indirect cost rate agreement. And lastly, you need to get information on any other costs that are going to be provided by your tribe or organization. And what I mean by that is, let's say that there's going to be some administrative space or space in your tribal complex or organizational building that's going to be used to implement the project. What would be the cost for that space and how do you arrive at those costs? Your accounting department should be able to help you with that number, or a facilities department if you have one. And the last thing that you need is pricing information for any other costs that you're going to propose. If you're going to propose any high ticket or unusual items, remember to include a price quote or something that corroborates the cost you're indicating. The reviewers don't have time when they're reading your application to go and research your costs. So if you provide it, it's helpful for the reviewers and also for ANA when they're looking at your budget. If you are proposing a consultant, get a letter or statement of work from them that indicates their rate and what they'll be doing on the project. Again, last year I saw a lot of applications where they were proposing cost for a consultant. Some of them were very high-priced consultants, and there was no backup information for me to refer to determine how did they come up with this cost. Why is this consultant so expensive? What is the consultant doing? So while you're gathering up that information, see if you can get that determination from that consultant. In section 4.2 of the funding opportunity announcement, it states that you enter your project budget in the Budget Information Standard Form known as the SF-424A. And that's what's up on your screen. This is actually the first page of the SF-424A. But this is where you enter your budget for the first year of your project in section B6 right here under the object. There's the object class categories listed. And you can find out the content of the object class categories by referring to the funding opportunity announcement. That will detail for you what all of those consist of. But noteworthy, and I'll indicate this right now, is that the 6G construction is not an allowable cost. So there shouldn't be anything there other than a 0 in an A&A project. So as you look at this, it gives you some information on the cost, but not a heck of a lot. Like, how many staff people does this personnel cost cover? Or what's this travel that this project is doing? And wow, where is that $54,975 of other? What is that? So A&A in the funding opportunity announcement indicates that you need to supply a line item budget along with a budget justification, which tells you how you came up with these costs. The budget and budget justification should detail how you came up with each of these numbers on this form. And you're going to do it for all of the years of your project. This form here, you're just inputting year 1. But if you have a 3-year project, like I said previously, you're going to have 3 budgets. So let's look at how you take this and turn it into a line item budget. This is a budget format, and on your screen, just like on that 424A, under the category, all of these categories are the same categories that are listed right here. But you've added columns. There's a column for your federal share. What are you asking A&A for? There's a column for your non-federal share. The non-federal share is the 20% required for the project. And lastly, there's a column that shows the project totals. So the totals at the bottom of this form, I should see your total federal share, your total non-federal share, and then over on the right-hand column, your total for each of those object class categories. But again, this is just showing the object class categories. Underneath each of these, you're going to start adding line item detail. And you're going to submit a budget that looks like this. This is a line item budget. And it shows under personnel, you can see that there's 3 salaried staff. It indicates the federal share requested, the non-federal share that's going to be provided, and the total. And look, under fringe benefits, it shows you how they come up with the fringe, what percentages they use, what benefits they're providing, and how they're allocating that between the federal share and the non-federal share. And it also shows some travel. Now, I'm only showing you 3 object class categories: personnel, fringe, and travel. But you're going to do this for your entire budget. So this is just, again, I want you to be able to see this, and because we're limited by time, I'm not going to show you an entire budget. So this provides you a lot more information, but the budget justification is going to tell me how I came up with those numbers. It's a written description of your line item cost. Reviewers should be able to determine if your costs are allowable, relevant, and reasonable. Now, allowable would be something like that construction. There is a listing in the funding opportunity announcement of allowable cost. Reviewers will be looking at that. Is it relevant? Relevancy can be corroborated by putting in activities in your objective work plan. Reasonable would be including price quotes for, like I said, those high-priced items or consultants. You're going to be supporting that and indicating how did you come up with those costs. You're also going to explain your calculations. If I look at your budget and your budget justification, I should be able to do the math and come up with the same numbers that you have in your budget. So you're going to provide me the calculations that you used in calculating your budget. You're going to put those in your budget justification. You're also, again, providing a budget justification for each project year. And similarly to what I said about the objective work plan, a budget, if you have a 3-year project, each year should not be the same amount requested. I should be seeing a different budget for each project year. It should not just be a carbon copy from one year to the next because you're doing different activities each year. And this last bullet on the screen is a formatting tip. Both the budget and budget justification should be single-spaced. And that's because they're included in the 150-page limit for an ANA application. So make sure that they're single-spaced. So let's look at that budget justification. Here it is for personnel. Here we have that executive director, and now we can see how those costs were arrived at. And we can also see what that executive director is doing because they're reminding us in the justification that the executive director is assisting with 12 activities in both Objective 1 and 2 during the first project year. Now this is just a short statement in the justification. I should be reading a whole bunch more about the executive director's roles and activities in that project approach that I told you about. Also note that there's this abbreviation FTE. FTE stands for full-time equivalent. You need to indicate somewhere in your application what your organization describes as being a full-time equivalent. Typically what that means is that it's the number of hours per year that your organization uses to determine that a person is full-time. A lot of organizations use 1,880 hours. If that's the case with you, indicate it. If it's another number, indicate that. The project director and the administrative assistant are both listed as working full-time, but they're also at, if you note here, they're only listed for 10 months. That tells me that they're probably new hires, but I can confirm this by going to the objective work plan and seeing an activity that says hire project director and hire administrative assistant. And because they're new hires, the amount calculated for their time in this first project year has taken into account the time to hire them. And you'd probably also discuss this in your project approach about the hiring of process of your tribe or organization. So remember that if you're hiring someone new, make sure to calculate the first year of their salary to take into account the hiring time frame, unless you plan to hire that person immediately on day one. You would also, again, discuss the hiring process of your organization and your project. So here's more of the budget justification. This is showing the travel portion of that budget. And in the funding opportunity announcement, it indicates that you will send 2 project staff to the ANA post-award in the first year, a project staff person, and a finance person. And the cost to attend the post-award training are specifically stated as being $2,500. So you don't need to calculate that. All you need to do is put it in your budget under the federal request. The funding opportunity announcement also states that if you are funded, you will be attending a grantee meeting each year of your project. And 2 project staff will attend that grantee meeting. And the funding opportunity announcement actually lists the amounts. $4,000 is the amount that was indicated for the Eastern region. The amounts for other regions are different, and again they're stated in the funding opportunity announcement. Western is $4,500, Alaska's $5,500, Hawaii is $6,000, and America, Samoa, Guam, and the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands are $8,500. And this is based on travel to the Washington, D.C. area, which is typically where the conference, the grantee meeting is held. This budget also indicated costs to attend an economic development conference. And in this sample budget justification, you can see how they calculated those costs. And it also, under the justification, indicates that where they're traveling to, and that it's related to the 9th activity in Objective 1. In your project approach, you would detail further how attendance at that conference relates to your project goal and objectives. But as you look at the breakdown on your left, round-trip airfare, typically you can just get onto a website and get a cost of airfare to your destination. Lodging and meals and incidental information can be found easily by going to the GSA.gov website, and that lists per diem rates for cities. And you can just plug in your city name and pull down the rate for hotels and meals and incidentals. When you pull down your lodging rate, make sure that you tack on just a little bit for taxes, because hotel taxes are usually pretty darn high. And lastly, there's some ground transportation here that they've factored into that. If I add up all of these numbers, it should equal the $1,338 that they're requesting to attend this conference. And again, it's also described, the purpose of attending this conference is described in the approach part of your application. So we've been talking about non-federal share a lot, and how do you calculate your non-federal share? ANA requires a 20% match of the total project costs. That means that ANA is providing 80% of your total project costs, and you're coming up with the other 20%. So if your total project costs are $250,000, you would multiply that by 20% and then come up with $50,000. So that means I should have a budget that shows a total of $200,000 in the federal share column and $50,000 in the non-federal share column, for a total of $250,000. So I have another polling question. Let's see if you can calculate the non-federal share. We have another poll for you. If you can see what the non-federal share would be if your total project costs were $280,000. So what would be the non-federal share on $280,000?
Okay, we've got about 60% who have answered. 84% selected $56,000, and 14% selected $70,000, and 3% selected $72,000.
Well, $56,000 is the answer, so I'm glad that a lot of you got that right. And always remember, if this is an area where a lot of applicants have problems with and questions on, remember, reach out to your technical assistance providers. We can help you with this, and we can help you come up with the answers. So reach out to us if you ever have any questions or you're confused about this, because believe me, there is a lot of confusion out there. So as a recap, the objective work plan is your project blueprint. If you give it to me, I should be able to implement your project. Your budget details the costs needed for the project. Your budget justification is the narrative version of your budget and tells how you arrived at your cost. The cost of all of your activities listed in your OWP should be reflected in your budget. And if a cost is included in your budget, you need to make sure that it has an activity associated with it in your OWP and describe it further in your project approach. And lastly, your justification should include sufficient detail for a reviewer to determine if the costs are allowable, relevant, and reasonable. So there are some resources available for you. The first and the best resource is actually your funding opportunity announcement itself. It has a lot of information in it. You need to read it from cover to cover. Another great resource that has some activities in it for helping you to come up with a project budget is contained in the Project Planning and Development Manual. And there's a link on your screen to how to download that manual. It's a PDF file that you can access. And lastly, here's that screen I told you about with the contact information for the regional technical assistance providers. These are the folks that you need to contact if you would like pre-application technical assistance. I would also recommend that you just go to their websites and also sign up to receive updates from them and information on upcoming funding opportunities, training opportunities, and webinars. Speaking for all of us, we are all great resources and we're all here to help you. So now I'd like to open it up for questions.
Thank you, Candy. You did a great job. We do have quite a few questions, though. So let me go back up to the top, and before we get started, I want to remind folks, if you are on the telephone, you can use the raise your hand function, which is a little hand that is on the side of your control panel, and I will unmute you and you can ask your question. If you do not have a microphone and you are not on the phone, you will need to type in your question, and I will read it aloud and Candy can answer it. So let's get started. First one, can you give examples of activities? We had a hard time with this and fitting it into the OWP, too simple versus too detailed. We had to remove some, so this might need to be explained. We had to remove an activity we thought was related, but it was not using A&A funds. We did not realize that at the time.
Wow. Well, when you, for example, one of the suggestions I referenced was about, if you recall, was about hiring, and that project director was a new hire. So on your OWP, you would indicate hire project director, and that's what would be on your OWP. You wouldn't indicate things like post advertisement for project director, review resumes for project director, go over qualifications of applicants. All of those are smaller activities involved in hiring the project director. So and you also need to make sure that each activity shouldn't be, again, you're just indicating key activities. You're fleshing out those activities in your project approach and detailing them more. So usually a couple of sentences it will do it for an activity. Now for number of activities, I'm kind of confused about how many activities that you were listing, because I've seen some pretty lengthy OWPs, and they didn't seem to have too much of a problem entering activities. If you were doing it on the Grants.gov form, you have that ability to enter multiple activities. Again, whatever you enter in that objective work plan, you're fleshing out when you describe it in your approach part of your application. But as to specific activities, what I would recommend with your project is if you could send it to your technical assistance provider, or you can even send it to, if you're not sure who that is, you can forward it to us, and then we'll get it to the appropriate regional staff person so that they can help you develop that objective work plan as it applies to your project.
Great. Thanks, Candy. Next question is a simple one for you. Is the problem statement the same throughout all objectives?
Yes. You should only have one problem statement. Remember, you've developed that problem statement through that community process, and unfortunately, ANA and projects have to be focused around one problem. So you need to craft that problem statement, and you're going to describe it under need for assistance, and then you're going to enter it in that OWP, and it should be the same problem statement throughout all of those forms. Similarly, your project goal should be identical on each of your objectives and objective forms.
Great. Thanks, Candy. Please clarify, the budget and budget justification will be included in the 150-page limit?
The budget and budget justification are part of the 150-page limit.
Great. Next question, do you prefer the budget justification to be in a table format or in a paragraph form?
I think it's best to set it up in a table similar to the one on the screen, where you had the numeric portion on one side and then your narrative description on the other side. One thing that we shouldn't see is that you're providing so much information in the budget justification but nothing in the approach. I've seen a lot of budget justifications that have done that before, where they put everything in the budget justification and leave it out of the application part. You really want to be basically corroborating information that you put in your approach and indicating how you came up with those calculations.
Great, Candy. And just to reiterate, there is, ANA doesn't prescribe a particular form or format, but putting it in a table format makes it easier to read. And making things easier for the reviewers as they're going through your application is always a good idea.
And frankly, putting it in a table is easier for you to enter, the applicants to enter the information in. So it's a lot easier way to set it up and enter the information.
Thanks, Candy. Okay, for required travel and required travel amounts, do we include a cost breakdown of airfare, lodging, etc.? What actually costs more for us to attend?
No, you don't need to include that cost. That is the cost that was prescribed in the funding opportunity announcement. If, during negotiations, if it comes up that it's going to cost more, that will be taken into account at that time during your application negotiation. But use the amounts in the funding opportunity announcement, and you do not need to break them down by airfare, lodging, meals and incidentals, ground, etc.
Great, thank you. If an in-kind match is being used, is there a location where you can find an official set of estimates to use in those calculations?
I'm not sure what your in-kind is. I think, again, this is going to be something that would be best to, we need to look at your application. I think we need to look at your project to help you better answer that question. So this is a good, something good, again, to request technical assistance for, so that we can read your project in its entirety and give you guidance and answer that question better for you as it pertains specifically to your project.
Just keep in mind, folks, that when you are estimating the cost for volunteers or room rental or whatever it happens to be, you're going to be using the fair market value for wherever your project is located. And of course, real estate values are very different depending on what city or county and state you're living in. Cost of living is very different from state to state, city to city. So it's fair market value for where your project is going to be located is a good rule of thumb. Next one, can applicants submit one objective for all 3 years?
Yes, you can. There are many projects that have only one objective. But again, remember, you're going to be doing different activities in each project year, so you're going to have to create a different objective for activity for each year. So you're going to be listing different activities. Some of the activities may be occurring in all 3 years, but not all of them. So make sure you take that into account if you are only using one objective.
Okay. Is the total of the federal share and non-federal share the amount we are requesting?
That's your total project cost. The total you are requesting is just the A&A, or also known as the federal share. That's what you're requesting.
Great.
But when you combine it with your non-federal share, that's when you come up with your total project cost. A&A is only going to provide 80% of your total project cost. You are providing 20%. And you need to indicate, that's why you have that budget with those columns in it, so you can see, or a reviewer can see, how you are allocating those costs. What are you going to do with the federal funds, and how are you going to use your 20% for the project?
Thanks. We receive free rent, utilities, security, and grounds maintenance from the casino. We do account for this in our financial statements using fair market value. Can we use this amount as part of our non-federal share?
Yes. And you would just show how you came up with those amounts, or how you came up with the fair market share, and just provide that in your attachments.
Next one. Can 638 BIA funds be used for match? Do you want me to take that one?
Yeah, you take that one.
638 funds are usually pass-through funds and lose their federal identity once they reach the tribe and therefore become tribal funds. So yes, they can be used as, since they are no longer considered federal dollars, they can be used as non-federal share. Okay, kind of staying on the same line, someone is asking if EPA gap funds can be used as non-federal match. And again, the answer is yes, they can. One more question, and then I think we were about done. So if anybody comes up with any questions, you need to type them in now, because we're going to wrap up here real quick with this last question. Last year, when I copied and pasted activities from the OWP Word document and uploaded into the online form, it took a very long time to upload each cell. Has this technical problem been addressed by ANA since last year?
That is a question that I cannot answer. I know they were aware of it, but I don't know if it has been addressed or not. That one is one that we'll have to get back to you on, and we can send out an email to you on that.
Yeah, I'm afraid that I don't think the process has changed any that way. The only reason why we, ask you guys to use the Word document to work out the chronological order of your activities is because, as Candy mentioned earlier, you cannot insert activities. I mean, it would be nice, but unfortunately the form doesn't allow that. So if you get all the activities put in for an objective and then go back and look at that form and figure out that you forgot an activity and it belongs in between activities 3 and 4, there's no way to insert a new activity in between 3 and 4. You would either have to leave it down at the bottom of the OWP form, or you're going to have to delete activities 4 through whatever and cut and paste again. Okay, let's see. I said we were going to finish, and then I got a flurry of some more questions. Are the results and benefits different for each objective?
Yes, they should be different for each objective. There might be cases where some of them overlap, but they should typically be, depending on your objectives, they should be different for each objective.
Okay, and one last question on match, and I'm afraid we're going to have to get a determination on this. The question is if WIA, W-I-A, Section 166 funds could be used as match. And I'm not familiar with those particular funds and using them as match. My initial answer would be probably not. But if you get in touch with your Training and Technical Assistance Center, Kathy, you can ask that question and we can check and see. And we have made it to the end of all of our questions.
Great. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us. Again, please reach out to us if you have any additional questions. This webinar will be available in approximately 2 weeks. And also, reach out to your regional technical assistance providers and sign up on their listservs and find out how they can help you submit your application. We hope that you are all funded and that you're all able to get your applications in, and please reach out to us if you need any assistance. Thank you for joining us today.
Take care, everyone. Have a good afternoon.